They thought she was just another shy new girl, someone easy to mock and easier to forget. But when the lights dimmed and the music played, what came next silenced the room, not with fear, but with fire. No one saw the fists coming. For more stories that hit harder than words, don't forget to subscribe to Simply Stories. Prom week had arrived, and the school hallways were buzzing with sequins, tuxedo fittings, last-minute dance plans, and whispered drama. Everyone was part of something except her. She walked through the main doors on a cloudy Monday morning, her steps calm, her eyes unreadable. There was nothing flashy about her, no glitter, no styled hair, no loud laughs to announce her presence. Just a plain black hoodie, jeans, and quiet footsteps that somehow echoed louder than the rest of the noise. By lunchtime, everyone had seen her, the new girl, the one who transferred just a week before prom. Nobody knew where she came from, and nobody really cared. What they did care about was how little she spoke, how much space she seemed to take up without even trying, and how her presence made the wrong people uncomfortable. She didn't try to blend in, didn't force a smile, didn't carry the anxiety that most new students wore like armor. Instead, she observed, calm, still focused, like someone who'd seen too much to be fazed. By teenage theater, the whispers started the moment she walked past the lockers. Who is she? Why does she look like that? She thinks she's better than us, or what? It wasn't curiosity, it was territory. The popular crowd, especially the self-appointed rulers of the school, weren't used to someone new walking in without acknowledging their power. So they did what they always did. They laughed loud enough to be heard. They pointed at her sneakers, her old backpack, her worn-out hoodie, but she didn't flinch. Her face didn't break. She just walked on as if the hallway were hers, and they were nothing but background noise. In class, she sat in the back. No phone out, no notebook doodles, just eyes forward, hands folded. When the teacher asked questions, she answered simply, directly. No one knew what to make of her. The kind of confidence without flash was rare, dangerous, and the ones who thrived on insecurity knew it too well. By the time the bell rang, a few snide comments had already been thrown her way. One boy, always desperate for laughs, blocked her path at the door and said, "You lost, or just mute?" She looked at him, paused for 2 seconds, and stepped around him without a word, out. His fake grin dropped before anyone could notice. By the next day, they were trying harder. In gym class, her locker mysteriously wouldn't open. In math, her pencil case went missing. In the cafeteria, she sat alone at the far end of a table near the window. Not because she wanted to isolate, but because no one would sit near her. That was their goal. Erase her without touching her, reduce her to nothing. But they didn't realize she had already survived being nothing before. This wasn't new. That afternoon, a girl from the popular group accidentally bumped into her in the hallway, spilling an entire water bottle down her front. There were gasps, fake apologies, then muffled laughs behind palms. The new girl looked down at her soaked hoodie, then up at the girl. No expression, no outburst, just one deep breath. She took off the hoodie, tied it around her waist, and walked away without a single glance back. But for half a second, her right hand curled tightly into a fist at her side. No one noticed except one boy in the corner who felt an odd chill pass through him when he saw it. The group didn't stop. Cruelty isn't loud at first. It grows in quiet, deliberate jabs. The next day at lunch, she found a chair, sat down, unwrapped her sandwich, and suddenly someone's leg accidentally swung out and knocked the table over. Her food hit the floor, her drink spilled across her backpack, and the crowd at the next table laughed like they were watching a show. She didn't say a word. She slowly bent down, picked up the sandwich, tossed it in the trash, then wiped her bag dry with the same calm focus she'd had since she arrived. Again, her fingers twitched around her knuckles. But that was the second time. By Wednesday, the rumors were everywhere. Some said she used to be in juvie, or others claimed she was kicked out of her last school. Someone said they saw scars on her arms during gym and assumed the worst. The lie spread like gasoline across dry wood. The fire was intentional, and all she did was walk through it without reacting. It made it worse. They wanted her to crack, to cry, to leave. Instead, she walked straighter, head higher, jaw tighter, like someone who knew how this would end, even if they didn't. Friday rolled around, the final day before prom. The gym was being transformed with balloons, streamers, and glittering lights. Girls tried on dresses in the locker rooms during lunch. Boys talked about rented suits and whose name was on the prom king ballot. It was supposed to be the biggest night of the year. The new girl sat on the library floor between bookshelves, reading. She hadn't asked about prom. She hadn't bought a ticket. But when someone asked the office assistant if her name was on the guest list, they were surprised to learn she had quietly signed up. No one saw her do it. No one knew she'd be there. That evening, as the final bell rang, she walked to her locker in silence. It had been jammed again, same as Monday. She didn't ask for help. She took a small paperclip out of her back pocket, bent it carefully, and popped it open herself, calm, focused, efficient. As she gathered her things, she looked at the picture. Taped inside the door, an old, faded photo of someone holding a pair of boxing gloves. For just a second, her eyes softened. Then she shut the locker, turned, and walked out. No one knew what tomorrow would bring, but something was building inside her, and the cracks were starting to show. Prom night had arrived like a storm of glitter and false promises. The gymnasium had been transformed into a world that didn't belong to reality, balloons floating under dim fairy lights. A rented fog machine pumping out mist, pop songs thumping through enormous rented speakers. Everyone came dressed like royalty, dripping with artificial glamour and insecurities painted over with eyeliner and bow ties. It was loud, artificial, perfect for hiding behind performances. Laughter filled the air, shallow and constant, like everyone was afraid of silence. Underneath the glitter, the judgment was thick, especially from those who ruled the social chain with teeth hidden behind champagne smiles. She arrived late. The door creaked open just as a slow song ended and the tempo picked up again. For a moment, no one noticed her. But as she stepped into the light, all movement seemed to pause. She wore a simple dress, one shade of deep navy, long sleeves, no frills. Her hair was pulled back in a clean knot. No makeup, no heels, just quiet elegance. And that was what made the crowd turn. Because in a room full of sequins and shine, she looked untouched, real, and that made them uncomfortable. It started small, a glance, a smirk, a whispered comment. Then the chain reaction. The popular crowd saw her standing by the door alone and grinned like a trap was about to be sprung. One of them, the loudest, nudged a friend and made a beeline toward her. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. She just stood there, looking past the room, as if she was walking into a fight she had already seen in her mind 1,000 times. The boy extended a hand, overly dramatic. "May I have this dance?" he asked with exaggerated charm. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, and after a pause, nodded once. The crowd gasped and laughed, thinking she'd taken the bait. They moved to the dance floor, where the lights circled above like spotlights. The music shifted to a slow, almost haunting beat, and the two began to move. She didn't try to impress. She didn't even try to match his rhythm. She just moved with quiet, graceful confidence, unbothered by the attention. But it wasn't a dance. It was bait. Others began circling them. More of the bullies joined in, pretending to dance too. She was surrounded now, locked in the center. A few started whispering loudly enough for her to hear. What is she wearing? Did she sew that? Dress herself? I think my grandma has better style. Then the circle tightened. She looked around. Every angle was blocked. The boy who invited her suddenly stepped back. Another girl shoved her lightly from behind, forcing her to stumble forward. She caught herself and turned, only to face more laughter. The DJ hesitated, unsure. But when the same girl made a dramatic gesture of fake surprise, "Oops, didn't mean to push," the crowd roared. The music stopped. Silence swept the room, broken only by laughter and the sound of a phone camera beginning to record. Flash on, held high. A dozen other screens lifted to capture the moment. One of the bullies stepped closer, holding a red drink in a plastic cup. She smiled sweetly and said, "Here, you must be thirsty." Then, without warning, she threw the drink straight at her chest. It splashed across the girl's dress, soaking the fabric, dripping down to her hands. The room erupted in laughter again, cruel and sharp, as if pain was the best kind of entertainment. The girl stood frozen, not from shock, but from stillness. There was no scream, no retaliation, no tears. She just stood there, letting the red liquid soak in, her eyes staring directly at the girl who threw it. Not blinking, not breaking. The laughter around them echoed, but she wasn't hearing it anymore. Her breathing had slowed. Her jaw tightened. And then, finally, she turned and walked away. The crowd parted, confused by the lack of a scene. One boy muttered, "That's it?" Another one whispered, "I thought she'd cry," but she didn't give them that. She walked through the gym doors and into the cool night air. Followed. No one saw what came next. Outside, behind the building, in the dark space between the dumpsters and the old storage shed, she stopped. The music inside began again, muffled now, distant like a memory fading fast. She reached into the small cloth purse she carried and pulled out a thin roll of fabric. Her hands moved quickly. She wrapped one knuckle, then the other, winding the cloth around each fist like she'd done 100 times before. Each pull of the wrap was tight, precise. This wasn't an impulsive move. It was preparation. She stood completely still for a moment once both hands were done, and she exhaled. Her eyes were calm. Not angry, not broken, just focused. She wasn't there for revenge. She was waiting for the right moment. Back inside. The DJ tried to lift the mood with a new track. The bullies laughed louder, rewatching the clip on their phones. One said, "Upload it, now it's gold." Another chimed in. She walked off like a little mouse. Bet she doesn't even come back. They were already moving on. Already. Forgetting that they had no idea. Because while they danced in their bubble of cruelty, outside under the silence of the stars, something far older than hurt was rising in her. Not rage, not vengeance, discipline, fire wrapped in stillness. A lesson forged in rings, sweat and grit. She walked back toward the gym slowly, and no one saw the storm she carried behind her eyes. The music thumped on. The lights spun lazily. Overhead and inside the gym, the mood had returned to normal at least on the surface. The bullies laughed louder than ever, reliving the moment on their phones, showing the video to anyone who hadn't yet seen it. The clip replayed again and again. The girl in the plain dress, drenched in red punch, walking silently out of the circle. They were so caught up in their cruelty that they didn't notice what was shifting in the air, like the atmosphere right before a storm. It's thick with something unspoken. Then it happened. A piercing scream tore through the hallway sharp. Sudden and unmistakably real. Every head in the gym snapped toward the doors. The music stopped instantly, the DJ frozen mid-track. For a moment, no one moved. Then the gym doors slammed open, and one of the main bullies' face pale, nose gushing blood, staggered in and collapsed onto the floor, gasping silence. He clutched his face, eyes wide with something far worse than pain fear. Real fear. The kind that doesn't come from embarrassment or injury, but from knowing you're not in control anymore. Gasps spread across the room. Someone rushed to his side. Another shouted, "What happened? Who did this?" But he couldn't answer. He just shook his head, mumbling, "I didn't see. I didn't see." The panic didn't take long to bloom. Another boy, one of the louder ones from the mocking circle, stood up and muttered, "I'm gonna see what's going on." He cracked his knuckles like he was stepping into a joke. His friends nodded nervously. He disappeared out the gym doors and turned left into the hall. He didn't make it 10 feet. A heavy thud echoed, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone groaning, and then a hollow crash like a body hitting a locker. This time no scream, just silence. Then more footsteps, then none. Inside the gym, the room went cold. Students started pulling back toward the walls, their confidence cracking. "Is it a fight?" someone whispered. "Is it a teacher? Did someone break in?" But no one had any answers. And the fear kept spreading. People began locking their phones, clutching them tighter. Someone dialed the office, but the call didn't go through. Another tried to open the emergency exit, but it wouldn't budge. Then came the rumor, fast and shaky. "It's her, the new girl. She's doing this." A hush swept the gym, like the room itself was listening. A few students denied. "It immediately she left," one girl said, laughing nervously. "She walked out. You all saw it." But others weren't so sure. One student looked up, eyes wide. "She never cried," he said softly. "She just ... stared." Meanwhile, out in the hallway, the security camera blinked above the lockers. It captured just enough of faint shadow moving quickly through the corridor. Not running, not stumbling, moving with purpose. The figure passed through the light just long enough to reveal part of a dress, sleeves rolled up, hands wrapped in cloth. Back inside, clusters of students began to form, inching toward the center of the gym. Fear had replaced arrogance. Even the bullies weren't laughing anymore. The phone that had recorded the video, deleted. Quietly, quickly. The ones who had shared it, now wishing they hadn't. No one wanted to be next. A few brave ones pushed the gym. Doors opened and peered down the hall. Nothing, just flickering lights and silence. A trash can was knocked over. A shoe lay alone on the floor. But no one in sight then. A voice spoke behind them. "I'll go." A girl, one of the quieter ones, someone who hadn't laughed at the video, stepped forward. She was shaking, but something in her eyes held steady. "Someone has to check," she said. "Maybe someone's hurt." She walked out slowly, the others watching her like she was stepping into a haunted maze. Each step echoed off the walls. Now the hallway stretched long and empty, lit only by the occasional flicker of fluorescent light. She passed the spot where the boy had been hit. His phone still lay cracked on the floor. Further down, she spotted another body groaning but awake, hand pressed against his ribs, eyes dazed. And then movement. At the far end of the hall, near the girls' locker room, someone was standing. The girl squinted. It was her, the new girl. She stood calmly in front of a cracked mirror mounted above a water fountain. Her sleeves were pushed up. Her reflection stared back at her with the same composure she had walked into school with that Monday morning. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't running. She was adjusting the cloth wraps on her fists slowly, tightly, like ritual. The brave girl approached cautiously. The new girl didn't look over at her. She didn't move at all. She just finished adjusting one wrap, then the other. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, steady, almost gentle. "This is your warning. Nothing else. No threats, no rage." Just 5 words said with the calmness of someone who meant every syllable. Then she turned, walked past the girl, and disappeared through a side door without looking back. The brave girl stood frozen in place, heart thudding. She didn't fully understand what she'd just witnessed. But she knew one thing. This wasn't about revenge. It was a message, and every single person in that gym was about to hear it loud and clear. The hallway held its breath, still humming with the energy of confusion and quiet fear. Word had already begun to spread like wildfire. Something had happened, something big, and the name on everyone's lips wasn't a question anymore. It was a certainty. The new girl, the one who walked in without glitter, the one who walked out without flinching, the one who didn't scream when they drenched her. She had disappeared into the shadows. And now, it felt like she had returned not as a student but as something far more powerful. Somewhere deep in her mind, while the gym trembled with speculation, her memory sparked. It began with sweat. Years ago, in a small, cramped garage with concrete floors and peeling paint, her world had been built on repetition, on pain, on control. Her fists, still young and clumsy, pounded at the bag until her knuckles stung. Her breath burned in her throat. She had cried once only. Once on her coach had said nothing, just handed her the gloves again. "You don't fight to hurt," his voice had echoed in the cold space, You fight because you can. Day after day, she returned. Rain, shine, bruises, exams, none of it stopped her. Her home had never felt safe, but the garage, that place became sanctuary. Not because it was easy, but because it demanded everything. Sweat poured off her arms as she learned the rhythm of footwork. One to jab, slip, counter, head low, shoulders square, eyes sharp. Her body, once awkward, grew disciplined. Lean. Her silence wasn't just personality, it was control. She learned to stay quiet under pressure, to breathe through pain, to let others underestimate her. Back in the gym hallway, a small crowd had started to gather. The prom inside was losing its grip. Students stood near the doorways now, phones tucked away, no one daring to record what might happen next. Whispers. Buzzed like insects, she's trained. She dropped 2 already. Don't mess with her. But disbelief still hovered. Not everyone believed it yet, and then another bully tried to test fate. He was one of the original group, the same ones who had circled her on the dance floor and laughed. His pride had been bruised by the rumors. Wasn't afraid of some quiet girl. He thought it was all overblown. He marched through the hallway, scoffing at the caution in the air. When he spotted her standing near a locker, arms folded, eyes lowered, he sneered. Thought you could scare people with a few cheap shots? He snapped. Let's see how you do face to face. He lunged. The move was clumsy, loud, all ego, no control. But she didn't step back. She didn't hesitate. She shifted. A single smooth motion. Her left foot slid back, her body angled. The punch he threw missed, completely met only air. And then she responded. One clean hook. Not wild, not angry. Just precise. It landed against his jaw like a hammer meeting steel. His eyes widened. His knees gave way. He dropped, not theatrically, not with drama, but heavily, suddenly, like a puppet with its strings cut. A few students gasped out loud. Others stepped back instinctively. Still, she didn't gloat. She didn't even look down at him. Her hands remained at her sides, fingers flexed, not clenched. I warned you, she said softly. Her eyes met the crowd, scanning the faces. Next time, I won't hold back. Number. One laughed. No one spoke. The hallway was utterly still, except for the sound of the boy groaning on the floor, holding his face. Moments later, security appeared at the far end of the corridor, called by someone who'd panicked when they heard the earlier scream. The 2 guards moved fast, walkie-talkies crackling at their hips. But as they approached, ready to take charge, something unexpected happened. The students moved first. She didn't start it, one girl said, stepping forward. She warned them, said another. She was just defending herself. The security guards paused, exchanging glances. One reached for the radio, but lowered it slowly. The scene didn't match what they'd expected. This wasn't a brawl. This wasn't chaos. There was one girl standing calmly, and 2 boys on the ground, both of whom had reputations for bullying. And surrounding them, not a mob, but witnesses. Students who, moments ago, had been part of the laughter. Now, they stood silent, watching her not with fear, but with awe. The new girl didn't protest. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. She turned and walked back toward the end of the hallway, past the lockers, past the cracked mirror, and out through the same door she had entered earlier that night. Her presence left like the final punchline of a story that was never a joke, and in the silence that followed, something strange began to happen. Respect. It didn't come with cheers. It didn't come with apologies. At least not yet. But it began. With that look, that shift in the eyes of those who had dismissed her just hours ago. Now they looked at each other differently, looked at themselves differently. The image of her dropping the boy with one clean hook replayed in their minds. Not as violence, but as truth. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, and when provoked, it reminds you exactly why silence should never be mistaken for weakness. The video hit the internet before the prom even ended. It wasn't polished. It wasn't staged. Just a 10-second clip captured by someone too shocked to look away, but not brave enough to step in. The sound was grainy, the angle shaky, but the moment was crystal clear. The boy lunging. Her slipping. The hook, the collapse, silence, then 5 words, "Next time, I won't hold back." By morning, it had spread like wildfire. Whispers turned to shares. Shares turned to reposts. And by sunrise, she was everywhere, though she herself had never touched a phone. Messages buzzed through student group chats. Screens lit up at breakfast. Tables, even those who weren't at prom now, spoke her name as if they had witnessed it. But the truth was, none of them really knew her. Not yet. She arrived at school like she always had, quietly. No change in her posture, her clothes, or her expression. But the hallway was different now. The usual morning chaos had dimmed. Conversations paused as she passed. Backpacks shifted to the side. Eyes lowered, not out of fear, but something else. Attention, maybe. Curiosity. A respect that hadn't been earned by shouting or popularity, but by presence. No one laughed at her outfit now. No one bumped her shoulder. She didn't walk faster. She didn't walk slower. She just moved forward, unbothered, unshaken, in classrooms. Students sneaked glances at her. Few exchanged messages across their desks. That's her. She's the one. "Did you see the footage?" One brave soul leaned over and asked, "Hey, are you really a boxer?" She didn't answer. Not because she was rude, but because she had nothing to prove. At lunch, the story gained more steam. Some said she was a professional. Some claimed she fought in underground tournaments. Others swore she knocked out 3 boys, not 2. Rumors didn't bother her. She just sat at a table near the back of the cafeteria, eating quietly. A few girls from the popular crowd, ones who had once laughed now, looked at her from across the room, but said nothing. Then came the teacher. It was subtle, no grand gesture, just a quiet moment between periods as the hallway thinned. A female gym teacher, gray streaks in her hair and years of grit behind her eyes, walked up and placed a folded paper gently on the girl's desk. She didn't say much, just looked her in the eye and said, "Thank you for standing up. For yourself. For others?" The girl nodded once. On the paper was an offer, a spot on the school's athletic program, the girls' boxing and wrestling team, equipment, training, competition, all of it. She folded the paper just as gently and slid it back. "No thank you," she said. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't disinterest. It was just her truth. She didn't fight for medals. She didn't want attention. The gym wasn't her stage, it was her sanctuary. Something personal. Something earned every single day, with bruises and breath. Later. That afternoon, she found herself alone again in the school's old, half-forgotten practice gym. The space smelled of old leather and chalk. The mats were worn, the air still. No crowd, no spotlight. Just a hanging bag swaying gently from the rafters and the echo of her own breath. She wrapped her hands the way her coach taught her, slow, deliberate, careful. One loop around the thumb, another across the wrist. Tug, tighten, pull. She stepped up to the bag. Jab, breathe, jab, slip. Hook. The rhythm returned. Like music only she could hear. The impact of her fists was soft but sharp like a whisper. That could cut glass. She moved with the kind of focus that only comes from years of repetition, not anger. It's not pride, just discipline. But she wasn't entirely alone. Behind the double doors, 3 girls stood quietly peeking in. They weren't mocking. They weren't recording. They just watched wide-eyed, breath held. One of them clutched her backpack against her chest. Another whispered, "She's amazing." None of them had ever seen fighting like that, not in movies, not in video games. This was different. This was real, controlled, beautiful, power without chaos, strength without cruelty. The girl paused, sensing their presence. She didn't turn, didn't invite them in, but she didn't send them away either. Instead, she returned to her stance, gave the bag one final, perfect combination, jab, hook, and then let her arms rest. The silence stretched, not awkward, but full. full of something more meaningful than applause. Later that week, one of the girls from the doorway would ask her, "Can you teach us?" She wouldn't answer right away. She'd just look at them with the same calm, unreadable gaze she always carried. Then, with a faint nod, she'd say, "Only if you're ready to work." Respect, she had learned, was never given freely. Not to girls like her, not to anyone who stayed quiet. You had to earn it not once, but over and over again. Through the sweat, through the silence, through every moment when it would have been easier to give in, lash out, or walk away. And now, for the first time, others wanted to walk that same road. Not because she forced them to, but because she showed them it could be done. 1 week later, the gym was transformed again, not by school staff, not by rules or traditions, but by the students themselves. Word had spread, not just about the fight, not just about the fists, but about the quiet strength behind them. Something had shifted. School hadn't declared it publicly, but everyone knew this second prom was a response. A recognition, an unspoken attempt to do things differently. It wasn't meant to erase what had happened. It wasn't a reward. It was a gesture. The same gym where she'd been humiliated was now strewn with soft lights and thoughtful effort. Oh, grand chandeliers. Or flashy DJs, this time just warmth. Real music, a real intention. Students, once too cool or too cruel, now moved with a different kind of energy. Not performative, not artificial. For the first time, felt like a prom built for everyone, not just the loudest. They invited her again. This time it wasn't forced, it wasn't a setup. Came through whispers, notes, a few brave voices in class and outside her locker. They said things like, "You should come," or "We'd really like it if you were there." No one expected her to say yes. She wasn't someone you could predict or pressure, but deep down many hoped. She arrived just as the sun dipped low. Same walk, same pace, same dress. She hadn't changed a thing. Not her outfit, not her hair, not her quiet. That same plain dress, simple and clean, flowed behind her as she stepped into the building. No makeup, no sparkle, just presence. The kind that didn't need decoration, but the moment she entered, something extraordinary happened. The crowd parted. Not because they feared her, not because she demanded space, but because they offered it. Instinctively, students stepped aside to make way, not out of obligation, but out of respect. It wasn't like the first time when they made room to laugh at her. This was different. Heads nodded quietly. Eyes held hers for a second longer than usual. Not to challenge, but to acknowledge. Even the music softened, as if sensing her arrival. And then, one of them stepped forward. A boy. One of the ones from that night. Not the worst, but certainly not innocent. He walked slowly, stopping a few feet in front of her. No friends flanking him this time. No smirk, just nervous breath and honest eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small, folded note, and held it out with shaking fingers. "I'm sorry," he said. She didn't reach for the paper. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She looked at him, truly looked. Kind of look that saw past performance. She saw the fear behind his apology, the shame trying to hide behind politeness. And she nodded once. Just once. A gesture that didn't forgive everything but didn't reject him either. He stepped back into the crowd. The music began again. She didn't run to the dance floor. She didn't join the circle of girls taking selfies or the boys showing off footwork. She simply moved to the side, hands behind her back, watching, breathing. Then, when no one expected it, she took a step forward, then another. The song was slow, not a dramatic beat drop or anthem, something softer, a rhythm that invited without demanding. She walked to the center of the room and began to dance, not wild. Not choreographed, just movement. Just release. She danced the way she fought. Calm, focused, powerful. Not for approval, not for validation. For herself. Her eyes closed at moments, letting the music swirl through her chest. Her arms moved like she was shadowboxing with memory. A turn, a lean, a sway. In that moment, no one dared interrupt. Not because she looked untouchable, but because she looked complete. Like someone who knew exactly who she was and needed nothing from anyone to confirm it. A few students began to join in slowly. First the quiet ones, then the brave ones. Then, gradually, the rest. Not to copy her, not to surround her, but to move alongside her, each person carrying their own rhythm. The gym didn't erupt in cheers. It breathed, it softened, and in the softest part of that night, she smiled, not wide, not showy, just enough. Glimpse of something healed. When the final song played, it wasn't the loudest or the most dramatic. It was a quiet instrumental, something thoughtful, almost like a goodbye. She stood near the bleachers now, watching others laugh and dance. The same kids who had once mocked her, some still unsure, some still learning. But now at least, they looked at her with new eyes. No crown, no sash. But she didn't need them. Her strength wasn't loud. It didn't beg to be seen. It was. For those who paid attention, it was more radiant than any spotlight. As the night drew to a close and students began to drift toward the doors, she lingered a moment longer. Alone again, not because she was left behind, but because she chose to stand in that stillness. She reached into her sleeve, brushing the cloth she once used to wrap her knuckles. She didn't need it anymore tonight. Outside, the sky had turned to velvet. She stepped into the cool air with that same steady pace. No revenge, no need to fight, just quiet power. She walked away from the school not needing anyone to watch her go. Because her story didn't end with a punch. It ended with choice, with peace. And as the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice returns, soft but sure. She didn't need a crown. She wore her strength like armor. And in a world full of noise, her silence was the loudest roar.